Trust me, you do not want to go into your Glacier National Park trip unprepared. Hi there, my name is Alex from Alex on the Map, and I'm here today to tell you what you need to bring with you when you are planning on going to Glacier National Park. As someone who grew up there, I'm pretty used to the weather patterns, even though no one can really be used to the weather patterns in Montana because it changes so quickly. I guarantee you there's at least one day a year where it snows and then it's absolutely gorgeous, so that's usually May. I've even experienced times where I thought I was well prepared and then I headed into the park and realized I didn't have what I needed, and that made it so much more miserable than if I had just taken the extra step of looking at the weather patterns online. Last year was particularly difficult for me because Daniel and I did the Highline Trail. We've done that trail a lot, but it was so hot. It was 95 degrees out and we were just packing our bags because we were backcountry camping. So yeah, it was a struggle. Definitely do not recommend going into things thinking that they're cold when they're actually hot, and vice versa. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into a few things you should know about the weather before you pack, and then we'll go into your packing list and the general items that you'll need for your trip. A lot of what you'll need to pack depends upon which time of year you're planning on visiting. If you're planning on visiting in the spring, it's going to be probably pretty snowy still and cold. I have a whole video on this about when the best time to visit is. Spring is not really one I would recommend. But summer actually gets really hot. You think you're in those high elevations, you're up north, maybe it's not gonna get so warm, but every year it seems to get warmer and warmer and warmer. Last year it was almost up to 100 degrees and it was really, really miserable and hot. Daniel and I were out hiking in the park and it was just nasty, but summer usually is the best time to go. So keeping that in mind when you do pack your belongings, knowing that it could get a little warm will help you a lot. And this is why I recommend fall, because fall is lovely. It's not too hot, it's not too chilly, and the park isn't as busy either. So not only do you have fewer crowds, but I overall find that it's easier to pack in fall because the weather is maybe a little more consistent than it is in the spring and even sometimes summer. And winter, you know, it can get down to negative temperatures in the park. That's why most people don't go in the winter. But if you are planning on making that part of your trip, then know in advance that you will need some really solid winter gear and you will need supplemental items than the packing list I am currently giving you, because this is more in mind for summer and fall, top times to go to the park, saying that there's probably not going to be a ton of snow. All right, here are some basics I absolutely recommend you bring no matter what time of year you're planning on going. They don't need to be super expensive. I think that's one thing to keep in mind. I have some recommended items in a packing list on my blog. The link will be below. You can check out some of the recommended items I think you should bring, but keep in mind these are just suggestions. You don't need to go out and buy that specific item or feel like you need to buy the most expensive item in order to be prepared. You just probably need some of these in order to round out your overall packing list. First of all is sunscreen. Oh my gosh, I cannot say this enough. You are at a higher elevation, and because you are at a higher elevation, you are likely to get burned. Also, depending on the type of year, you might get some reflection from that snow, so you're gonna get an even more intense burn than you would just normally. I don't know about you, I'm SPF 50 club, so that's what I would recommend. Of course, if you don't burn as much, that's up to you, but sunscreen is a must. And obviously, if we're gonna do sunscreen, sunglasses are also a good idea. Again, ones that protect your eyes with the UVA rays or UVB rays or all the rays, just to make sure that your eyes are protected as well. Again, if there is snow, you'll also get that reflection and it can be extra hard on your eyes. So sunglasses are a must as well. No matter what time of year, bring a reusable water bottle because you are going to be drinking a lot of water, whether it's winter or summer. If you are planning on doing some backcountry stuff or a long hike, I also recommend maybe considering a water bladder. Last year, I brought both my water bottle and my water bladder. So I had, I think, almost close to 5 liters of water, and I went through all of it in my hike. So keeping that in mind as well, you will need a lot of water. The good thing about taking a reusable water bottle is you can fill it up at the various stations throughout the park. The they're really good about making sure that you have access to water when you need it. Bug spray is important. I bring it. Sometimes I don't really need it depending on the time of year. So when Daniel and I were hiking in May, it was unusually warm. We had a lot of bugs this year, especially on kind of the west side of the park. We moved over to the east side of the park later in the season and had no problem with bugs. Didn't even need the spray, but always a good idea to bring it anyway. Of course, you're gonna want your camera. You gotta take pictures of your amazing trip. How are people gonna know you were there? You don't need anything insane. Phone cameras are perfect. You know, it's all what you feel comfortable using, but definitely make sure you bring that as well. All right, now we're gonna get into the clothing and what you should actually bring with you when you are planning on doing several different activities in the park. Part of why I put this packing list together is because you're going to be doing some different things. Unless you're hiking every single day, you might also take a boat tour, or you might also consider rafting. So I included a few items in this list that I think you'll want to have no matter what. You might use them, you might change your mind on what you want to do, and you have access to that. No matter what, bring a rain jacket. The way Glacier is situated, it is right on the edge of the Pacific Northwest territory, so you do get some rain, and oftentimes when you least expect it. That can kind of be an issue if you don't have a rain jacket, because then your clothes will soak through. It just makes the whole experience miserable. If you're out in the backcountry, it's even more extreme. You might be hypothermic. So really making sure you're prepared with that outer rain jacket layer is super important. I also recommend a good pair of hiking boots, even if you aren't planning on doing a ton of hiking, just because that will make sure that your experience on the trail is a lot more pleasurable than if you're dealing with a pair of shoes that may or may not be up to the task. You don't have to buy the most expensive hiking boots on the market in order for that to make sense, but maybe should have a little bit of ankle support if you're prone to twisting your ankle. Make sure it has good treads on the bottom so you can keep your balance and you have traction as you go. If you're a hiker, you might also want some hiking pants, and I have a ton of hiking pants that I love, but I really love my Sahara from REI. I'm not sure if it's still discontinued, but I have an alternative in my packing list on my blog. It just moisture wicks, it keeps you nice and light and cool. I've worn it at all types of the year and really enjoyed these pants. Again, whether you plan on really hiking or not, just makes you more comfortable overall when you're headed up and down those elevations. It keeps you dry if rain comes. There's just a lot of pluses. I also recommend a long sleeve shirt because it can get pretty cool at night. Also, depending on what type of year you're planning on being out and about, having that extra layer can make a big difference. It can keep you from getting too cold, especially in those chilly evenings and mornings. If you're gonna wear hiking boots, a good pair of hiking socks is definitely necessary. I love Darn Tough or Smart Wool, any of those brands that have kind of a combination of merino wool and some sort of moisture wicking fabric, because I don't know about you, but my feet get really sweaty and disgusting, so this kind of keeps that from rubbing. They're also not the cheapest, so keeping that in mind. I actually only have a few pairs that I recycle through because you can wear them more than once. They don't get too dirty. You don't have to wash them every single time. So you probably, for your trip, depending how long you're there, only need about one or two. And we were talking about sun protection. A hat is super important. It doesn't really matter what type of hat, baseball cap, hiking hat, whatever makes you feel the most comfortable and protected while you're out there. I also recommend grabbing a pair of sandals to take with you, and I don't mean the super fancy strappy type sandals. I mean actual kind of like Tebas or Chacos, ones that are really gonna stay on your feet, especially if you plan on rafting the river, which I highly recommend that you do take the time to raft the Flathead River. If you do that, you are gonna have to have some sort of protection for your feet anyway. Sandals are a great way to do that. And also, you might want to change out of your hiking boots into something a little bit more comfortable in the evenings. And I always recommend a fleece no matter what time of year you're planning on visiting Glacier, because it can get really cold. Honestly, sometimes we've gotten up, I've been really amazed at how freezing those mornings can be sometimes. So having that extra layer that you can always take off, strip, put in your day pack can make a huge difference. We're gonna switch to gear now. I highly recommend for your first gear item that you always bring bear spray with you. the chances of running into a bear are very, 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 very low. I say that having done it twice, but that's not going to happen to you, at least not if you are prepared. And bear spray is 97% effective at keeping bears away. So even on the most popular trails, there have been bear sightings. Knowing what to do in a situation like that can make a big difference. I am planning on releasing a video about how to use bear spray, so keep on the channel, subscribe, because I will be dropping information your way on how to do that. One trick I found really helpful when traveling to places with bears is you can't bring bear spray on the flight with you, so there's no point in making sure that you're prepared before you go. You either have to get it there, rent it there, or this is my secret tip that my brother taught me. He worked at a resort in Montana, and he said people would leave the bear spray all the time. So what you do is you go up to the front desk when you first arrive and just say, hey, do you have any bear spray left over? Because they can't just throw it out either. They have to dispose of it in a certain way. More likely than not, they're gonna have an excess of bear spray that they just don't know what to do with. So feel free to ask at the front desk, and then you could get some free bear spray because it's not cheap. It's pretty expensive. Another absolute item you should have is definitely a day pack. It, again, doesn't have to be anything fancy. I recommend Osprey, but knowing that they are kind of on the nicer end. The Daylight is the one that I choose sometimes. I also like Cotopaxi for just kind of like a more easy day pack kind of thing. But having that day pack can really make a huge difference for you rather than carrying something in a purse or even having too much of a bag. Obviously, this is going to be different if you go into the backcountry. You're going to need something a little different. But for most day hikes, for most visitors to the park, a day pack should be just fine. I also recommend a waterproof phone case, considering we're gonna be doing some water activities, whether you're rafting or taking a boat tour. It just makes sure that your precious phone doesn't get all bugged up. I'm not gonna go into major detail in this video about what you need to pack for camping for Glacier National Park, but I am gonna suggest that maybe you keep track of this channel because that is the kind of information I will share. Camping can be a little bit difficult because it can be harder to find certain items. I do recommend that if you are planning on camping and gathering most of your gear in the area before you go, you head to a local gear shop because locals can tell you, okay, I think you need this or you're good on that. There are plenty of gear shops in the Flathead Valley. There's an REI. I recommend Sportsman Ski House is a great one. And they'll just be able to tell you, okay, make sure you have this item with you or not. Likewise, I'm not majorly gonna go into backcountry camping and what you need for that because that's a whole separate video, but same advice kind of as the first one. You can go to these shops and have it custom designed for your trip and what you might need exactly for that. Another tip I want to drop as well, if you are headed into the backcountry, is there is now a new company in Columbia Falls. They're called the Wilderness Edge by Right On Trek. What you can do is rent your backcountry gear because it can be kind of expensive. Maybe you don't want to buy a ton of stuff and then just leave it there. I recommend you don't do that. But they have access to a whole bunch of sleeping bags, tents, bear spray, whatever you need. And you can just rent it for the time you're in the backcountry and then return it when you're done. All right, I hope this was helpful for you when putting together your packing list for Glacier National Park. If you've enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to get more videos like this. And I'll be back very soon with more information to make your Glacier National Park trip the one of a lifetime.